Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into what's honestly one of the wildest macroeconomic puzzles in the digital entertainment space right now. We call it the Indian gaming paradox. Think about a market with absolute jaw-dropping scale that just smashes head-on into some really harsh economic realities. If you follow global tech, you know India is a massive focal point. But as we're going to see today, winning here, it takes a completely different playbook.
So here's the roadmap for today. We'll start with the Indian gaming paradox itself, then look at the ARPU problem, regulatory roadblocks and GST, eSports infrastructure and stigma, how companies are navigating these market challenges, and finally, the future of interactive media.
Okay, let's dive straight into part one, the Indian gaming paradox, massive scale versus hard realities. 420 million. That is the staggering number of active gamers in India right now. Just to put that into perspective, India has about 835 million internet users in total. So yeah, literally half of the connected population is playing digital games. Driven by super affordable smartphones and these massive drops in mobile data tariffs over the last few years, the top of the user funnel is just overflowing. It's the kind of rapid adoption most countries can only dream of.
But then, you hit this number, $3.03. This is the average revenue per user, or ARPU, in India's gaming sector. So you've got 420 million players, but on average, they're generating just over $3 a year. That right there is the whiplash contrast. It creates this immense dramatic tension for global publishers who are trying to figure out how to operate and, more importantly, how to actually turn a profit in this booming ecosystem.
Which brings us to Section 2, the RPU problem, global context and market evolution.
When you compare this to both mature and emerging markets, the contrast is honestly stark. Look at the US, generating over $221 per user. China sitting at $73. Even an emerging market like Mexico is pulling in over $34. And then there's India, all the way at the bottom with $3.03. This massive monetization gap basically means that traditional global business models, selling a premium $60 console game or relying on a tiny group of big spenders, they just don't translate here. Developers literally have to acquire exponentially more users just to break even.
And this brilliantly illustrates why that gap exists. The digital ecosystem here is incredibly young. Between 2005 and 2010, the market was in this pure experimentation phase, mostly just pre-installed mobile games like Snake. It wasn't until the monetization phase kicked off post-2016, driven by the telecom revolution and dirt cheap data, that gamers actually started downloading apps en masse. And now, cutting to the present day, the industry has crashed right into a heavy regulation phase. You see, the ecosystem didn't have decades to slowly mature like it did in the US or Japan. It essentially exploded overnight.
All right, moving on to Section 3, regulatory roadblocks and GST, the 28% tax crisis. Let's neutrally break down the mechanics of this friction by just looking at the accounting models. Globally, the standard practice is to tax gross gaming revenue, or GGR. That's basically the platform fee, the actual amount the company keeps for providing the service. But under the new Indian model you see on the left, the government levies a 28% goods and services tax on the total money deposited by users into skill-based online games. So rather than just taxing the company's fee, the tax hits the entire prize pool entry as well. As Bipin Sapra, a tax partner at EY India, points out, the industry consensus is that adjusting this GST to the gross gaming revenue is necessary if the sector is going to reach its potential. Because right now, gaming companies are largely eating this heavy tax burden themselves to avoid scaring off players, and the human cost has been severe. According to an EY survey, 58% of gaming companies are facing revenue declines, hiring freezes, and direct job erosion. It is a massive, tangible roadblock.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, eSports, infrastructure and stigma, and why India lacks global success.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer number of systemic hurdles holding players back. While teams in places like South Korea or the US are training in dedicated facilities with fiber optics, Indian players are largely relying on unstable mobile internet. There's a severe lack of professional boot camps. Then add in the unpredictability of sudden government bans on massive titles like PUBG and BGMI, which completely shatters any competitive momentum. Sponsors get hesitant to commit long-term. And we can't forget the cultural hurdle, deep social stigma. Parents are still strongly pushing traditional paths, like engineering or medicine, which leaves virtually zero grassroots scouting or support for young gaming talent.
But it's not all doom and gloom. Section 5, navigating market challenges, adapting and thriving. So, the crucial point is this. If traditional monetization doesn't work, you adapt the model.
As Manoj George at Skara Gaming highlights, India is a highly price-sensitive market, but it has the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI. This incredibly seamless instant digital payment network. So local companies are leaning hard into hyper-micro transactions. We're talking 15 to 20 rupees, which is literally mere pennies in USD. By using these frictionless UPI payments, they're letting sheer transaction volume compensate for the low individual spending. It's a genuinely brilliant structural adaptation.
And we're seeing concrete proof that this localized adaptation leads to massive corporate success. Take NOW in gaming, for example. They've effectively navigated this complex market, recently reporting $58.5 million in revenue for the first 9 months of the fiscal year and returning to solid profitability. Now they're actively bolstering their leadership and gearing up for a major IPO push to fuel global expansion. It just proves that if you deeply understand how the Indian audience actually wants to transact, the ceiling for success is incredibly high.
Let's move on and see how this builds into Section 6, the future of interactive media, beyond traditional gaming.
The overall gaming and interactive media market in India is projected to triple, reaching a staggering $7.8 billion by the end of the decade. But here is the kicker. That growth is heavily driven by an explosion of non-traditional segments. Things like astro and devotional tech, which is basically digitizing India's massive offline spiritual market through one-on-one consultations, is projected to hit $1.3 billion. Microdramas, those short, serialized mobile-first shows, expected to reach $1.1 billion. Short-form video, social discovery, audio streaming, they are all seeing these explosive upward growth curves.
So what's fundamentally driving all of this? A mobile-first youth demographic. With a median age of just 29, especially concentrated out in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, this massive audience is actively seeking connection and culturally relevant content. They aren't just passively consuming media anymore. They're engaging in one-on-one private calling, interactive storytelling, and virtual tipping for creators. They're fundamentally shifting digital consumption away from standard gaming and moving toward deeply interactive, community-driven entertainment.
Which leaves us with this final thought-provoking question to ponder. As digital familiarity deepens and the payment infrastructure continues to mature, will India's sheer, unparalleled scale eventually rewrite the global rules of monetization, or will those deep-rooted structural hurdles we talked about, the taxes, the low ARPU, the stigma, keep it the ultimate digital paradox? It's an absolutely fascinating space to watch, and a puzzle the biggest tech companies in the world are currently racing to solve. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.